In the end, it all comes down to a simple choice. Either we will say to God, thy will be done, or God will say to us, thy will be done. Either we will choose to spend eternity with God, or we will choose to live it without him. God doesn't send anyone to hell. Hell is that fundamental choice to be the Lord of our own lives, the God of our eternity, the captain of our souls. It's where it's all about me. And by definition then, hell excludes love. Not only the God who is love, but any kind of genuine love, because love by nature is other-focused. As I tried to illustrate in several previous blogs, hell is miserable. It's total isolation, complete loneliness. You get you and anything you want for all of eternity. What could be worse? In response to those blogs, somebody submitted the perfect question. They asked, if all that's true, then why would anybody choose hell? Great question. John 3:16 is the most famous verse in the Bible. It's where Jesus says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that anybody who believes in him would not perish, but have eternal life." If you keep reading that passage, Jesus goes on to say that he came not to condemn the world, but to save it. How awesome is that? Who wouldn't want this salvation? It's the best news ever. But Jesus then goes on to say that there are some who wouldn't want this salvation. There are some who will reject him because, as he says, they prefer the darkness. They prefer to hide in it so that they can do things their own way. There are some who will reject this amazing love of God and the salvation it brings because they prefer to be the captain of their own souls. Like the person who submitted this week's question, I have a hard time trying to understand how anybody could reject the irresistible love of God. I mean, it's so clearly what our hearts long for most. Who would want to spend eternity without him? But in this passage, Jesus is saying that despite the misery it causes, there are some who will prefer separation from God. They'll prefer hell because at least that way they get to be their own God. They get to be the center of things, in control of everything. There are some who will actually prefer something else to the love of God. There are two examples that drive this home for me, how it's even possible. The first is this. You realize that we are living in the safest, most comfortable, most affluent time in history. We who live in the first world are, that we have it better than anybody else, any other people has ever had it throughout history. And on top of that, thanks to technology, we are able to communicate with more people in more ways than ever before, exponentially more ways. So why is it that we are feeling more isolated and lonely and depressed than ever before? The numbers are staggering. It's so bad in the UK that the government actually had to appoint a minister of loneliness to deal with the epidemic effects. While there are many factors, the main reason is because we are choosing to isolate ourselves more and more. Relationships are hard. Face-to-face interactions require time and effort. It's so much easier to just shoot a text or to like a picture on Instagram. That way we're in control. We can always ignore a text or scroll down further on our news feed. If we're honest, we prefer this because we get to set the terms. I'm sure you've gone out to dinner sometime and seen, or maybe been part of, a family where everybody's looking down at their mobile devices. Nobody's talking to one another. Despite the misery this isolation is causing us, we prefer it to having to surrender some of the control it gives us. And this self-imposed isolation, the final destination of that trajectory of self-imposed isolation is hell. The other example is from C.S. Lewis's masterpiece, The Great Divorce, which is a story about a number of souls who are in hell that take a bus trip to heaven. They can get out of the bus and stay in heaven if they want, but one by one, each of them gets back in the bus to go back to hell, with one exception. The example that hits closest home to me is the theologian who has devoted his life to studying about God. He loves studying about God. But when he gets to heaven and has the opportunity to see this God that he loves studying about so much, to see this God face to face, he balks. Then he makes all kinds of excuses, and finally he declines the opportunity, choosing instead to go back to his studies in hell. He loves studying about God more than loving God himself. Is there anything in your life that you love, anyone that you love more than God? There's a battle raging in our hearts, a battle for our souls, for our ultimate allegiance, for our ultimate love. If hell is a choice, then it seems like a no-brainer that we would all choose heaven. But despite the misery of this self-imposed isolation that is hell, despite the reality of that, these two examples illustrate how frightfully easy it would be for us to end up preferring it. The hard and undeniable truth is that we have a natural inclination towards self-absorption. As wonderful as it seems to have union with a perfectly loving God, we are inclined to prefer ourselves over God, and that puts us on a trajectory to hell. The only thing that can shake us out of this, the only thing that can turn us around, is if we are swept off our feet by the very love of God. The only thing that can save us is if we see the astounding depth of God's love for us, the love that He poured out on the cross. Only the love of Jesus can put us on a trajectory toward heaven. So what do you think? Do you think that people actually choose hell? Let me know what you think by going to the Contact EJ page of the Raising Jesus website. Also, would you please like the Raising Jesus Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and tell your friends about us? I'd truly appreciate that. Thank you.